For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. Am I right? I mean, it's not like you weren't warned. I told you, the chorus told you, the foreshadowing told you, but still, it gets me every time. Shakespeare. Now, my friends, let's review this genre called drama, as well as the life of William Shakespeare, the Elizabethan era, the literary devices used in the play, and let's prepare to make a claim about this work and to build an argument for that claim in a literary analysis essay. Are you ready? So right at the start of this unit, we learned that drama is its own form of literature. It has characters, settings, and a plot. But instead of being written in prose, it's written entirely in dialogue, because it's written with the intention that it will be performed. Romeo and Juliet has been performed countless times since its origin in around 1595, and it's still being performed. You can see a stage play, a ballet, a movie. It's timeless. It's a classic, like Beanie Babies. Aww. Romance is always in fashion, and what could be more romantic than that balcony scene in Act 2, am I right? Romeo is down below in the garden, and he compares Juliet to the sun because she's suddenly the center of his world and gives him light and life and warmth. In that famous scene, the sun becomes an extended metaphor because the comparison goes on over several lines of text. You know, she is the light that breaks through the east, she will kill the envious moon, etc., etc. In that way, it also becomes some important symbolism. You'll recall that light and darkness, those two opposing forces, are often used as symbols throughout the play. As a matter of fact, the idea of light versus darkness is so common that it becomes a motif. And while we're on the subject of literary devices, how about that dramatic irony? You know, when you're reading through Act 5 and you know that Juliet's not really dead, but you know Romeo doesn't know that, and you wish you could just reach through and tell him, but you can't, and it's tragic, and I'm sure you figured out by now why William Shakespeare has got to be probably the most famous playwright who has ever lived. He could tell a story, create such tension within it, all while stuffing it filled with these literary devices. And on top of all that, writing it in iambic pentameter. Dude was seriously amazing. It's no wonder then that he was one of the superstars of the Elizabethan era, a time period where lifespan was relatively short compared to now, but life itself was filled with new ideas, inventions, and revolutionary new works of literature. So, now we've reached our final week. It's time to go over the plot, characters, setting, vocabulary, literary devices, the playwright, the era, everything we've covered over the course of this unit. You'll get your daily dose of practice questions, of course, but the big task is you're going to be writing a literary analysis essay, which is a type of argumentative essay, but the argument you're making is about a literary work. Anyway, you'll have an introductory paragraph that includes a claim or a thesis statement. Then you have body paragraphs, 2 or 3 of them, that support your claim with evidence, logic, and reasoning. Finally, you'll have a conclusion in which you review the main points of your argument and restate your thesis in a way that drives home the point that you have successfully proven your claim. Piece of cake, right? Your essay will have a minimum of 500 words, follow MLA format, use direct quotes and in-text citations, and use present tense verbs to refer to the author's process or a character's actions. By now, you know the drill. At this point, you're probably asking yourself, how am I going to come up with an idea for this thesis statement? Well, luckily for you, we've got some great questions about the play. You're going to pick one, answer it, and turn your answer into your thesis statement. Brilliant! Let's take a look at some of those questions. Are Romeo and Juliet victims of fate or of their families? Who bears the blame for the deaths of Romeo and Juliet? Is Romeo a Petrarchan lover? Good old Francesco Petrarca, you remember him from the early Renaissance and from week 1 of our study. Is Romeo and Juliet a story about the power of love or the power of hatred? Which character is the true protagonist of Romeo and Juliet? And other questions like, are the love and devotion between Romeo and Juliet believable? After all, Juliet is 13 years old, and the whole romance takes place over the course of 1 week. Or is Romeo a hero? Can Romeo be trusted? How does foreshadowing contribute to the mood of the drama? And finally, what symbols do the most to contribute towards the development of a theme? So you might be thinking, how do I turn one of these questions into a thesis statement? All right, so you're gonna take the question, give it your simple answer, and then add some context to that answer. And finally, state it in an academic manner. Let me give you an example. Let's take the question, are the love and devotion experienced by Romeo and Juliet believable? And let's say my answer is no, it's totally not believable. But then I need to give it some context, like when you look at Juliet's age, the length of the relationship, and Romeo's fickle and impulsive personality, you have to see that their love and devotion are totally bogus. But I need to turn that into a more academic sentence, like, in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Juliet's immaturity, the relationship's brevity, and Romeo's impetuous nature expose the couple's romance as nothing more than a tragic case of infatuation. Let's see, I got the answer to the question stated as a claim, and then I've added this context to ground my opinion. And of course, I remove words like you, you've, and unfortunately, totally bogus. We don't want any first or second person pronouns, contractions, or slang. This is academic writing. Now, you may be looking at this and feeling a little indignant because you don't agree with my thesis statement. And that's a very good sign. A good thesis statement shouldn't be stating the obvious. It should be presenting an idea that's worthy of a good argument. You want to know what else I did? I noticed 3 specific points that could be used for body paragraphs of my essay. I pointed out Juliet's immaturity, the brevity of the relationship, and Romeo's impetuous nature. Now all I have to do is find evidence for these 3 points, and I basically have my essay. Another thing that I did was I replaced Juliet's age with Juliet's immaturity, and I did that on purpose. Because if you asked me to prove that Juliet's age was 13, that would take a sentence, right? Now ask me to prove Juliet's immaturity, that gives me enough meat to write a whole paragraph. This does bring up an important question, which is, what if it's impossible to find enough evidence to support your thesis statement? Well, you should probably find a different thesis statement. You're gonna need to find a lot of evidence to be able to properly support it. Okay, so now it's time to review everything you know about Shakespeare, the Elizabethan era, and the literary devices that make Romeo and Juliet a time-honored classic. You'll of course be reviewing all these things in your daily assignments and online practice sets. And then you'll put your literary brain to work and come up with your own ideas about the play. Because the power of literature doesn't come from what's written on the page. It comes from when you take that and apply your own thoughts, experiences, and opinions to make it your own. All right, I think you're ready. And even though parting is such sweet sorrow, my friends, I will bid you all adieu.